Hi folks, shall we begin? Any apologies?
Hello. Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Godwin today.
Right. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other disclosable interests. Any? Right, okay. Confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting. We had a kind of brief look at that last night. Yeah, are you okay with that? Anybody like to propose that we accept them? Dean Clark, and seconded by Andrew Wilmot. Fantastic. Chair's announcements. I haven't got any announcements. We did have a pre-meeting last night. We are going, well, one announcement. We are going to have an extra meeting in March concerning the Environment Agency and trying to bring them into this organisation and give an update on the catchment overall scheme and measurement of how flooding will affect all of the different areas as a cumulative effect of the attenuation processes that have been done, but also the cumulative effects of all of the flood defences as well, because we were told that that was being prepared and yet there is still no sign of it. That's fairly accurate from what we discussed last night, wasn't it? Okay, cool. So details of that will be posted out at some point soon. I don't believe there is any public participation. Yeah. Okay, so the first item is the medium-term financial plan. Would you like to speak on that, Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, obviously slightly delayed from previous years, but we had to wait for the government to tell us as our early Christmas present how much money they were going to give us for the next 3 years. But the major points of the report I want to pull out, first of all, are the assumptions that underpin the MTFP, and that's in paragraph 4.2, table 1, that shows my assumptions to pay general inflation, council tax, and interest rates we're going to earn over the life of the plan. Pay inflation I put slightly higher than general inflation. That's largely because pay awards have recently been driven by the increases in the national living wage nationally, have obviously a knock-on effect upon local government pay, and that has tended to rise above or stay above the general level of inflation. The MTFP is really a product of the funding the government have given us, and that's detailed in section 7, where they've given us a new business rates baseline, an amount of revenue support grant for the next 3 years that's reducing each year, but is obviously, for the figures there, very good news, and the continuation of the extended producer responsibility grant that is tied into recycling that was new in 25-26 and has increased into 26-27. Appendix A sets out obviously all of the detail, but those levels of income coming in from government enable us as a council to meet the cost pressures that are detailed in section 5, and the big one there is the ability for the council to pay for the introduction of food waste collections from next year. That includes the setup costs in 26-27 and an assumption that the service will roll out during the year and then be a full service from 27-28. It also enables the council to invest in its housing team and also pick up some government grants that are now included in the main grant. It also has section 5.5 details, and this will be picked up more fully in the budget that we'll do in next month, is it does give the council the continued ability to invest in its priorities. So the figure stated in section 5.5 is 1.8 million. That is likely to change a little bit by the time we come to do the budget, but the principle is still there. There will be a priorities pot that this year we used for community grants, community facilities, and it will be for executive committee after we've set the budget to agree where we use those priorities. As I'm sure you've picked up, the assumption is for a 0 rise in council tax, and even with a zero rise in council tax, we're able to fund food waste. We're able to fund that £2 million or £1.8 million into priorities, and we're able to maintain a healthy set of balances and a balanced budget over that period. So much better than it could have been. Obviously, this is all in the light of the expected local government reorganisation in April 28. The 3-year financial settlement takes us 1 year past that. If for whatever reason that date slips or doesn't happen, we will have to revisit these figures in far more detail at that point.
Thank you, Andy. At the pre-meeting last night, there were a number of questions that people wanted to ask. There was no particular order, though, so who would like to go first? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Yeah, can I ask Andy on on item agenda 10 and point 3? It mentions Malvern Theatres. There's going to be a spend, hopefully, this year of £10 million. The government did, in fact, pledge us £20 million, which we bid for, if you remember, very, very rather successfully too. Can we be sure that the government has got the other £10 million that they will be bringing forward, or have we already got it hidden about our person somewhere? And
I haven't got it hidden under my seat. Yes, I think we could be fairly. Certainly, the government have paid us £6.5 million this year, and we will only be spending about £1 million this year. What this doesn't show us is obviously the agreed capital programme budget for 25-26 already assumes a large element of it expected expenditure on the theatre that will actually slip into 26-27. But yes, all indications so far is the government will pay up what they owe us, and certainly they've paid us so far exactly what we've expected to this date.
there is another question, but I think you might want to do brought something else.
Yes, it was an
forward, yeah.
element. Do we have any assurance that there won't be an overspend on that project?
Currently, we've agreed a price with Speller Metcalfe, the builders, that is within budget. We have a healthy contingency within that budget as well. But until a spade is dug in the ground and they start work, nobody can give you a guarantee that it won't overspend. But what we can say is so far, as I said, we are within budget on the build, and we have, as I said, a healthy contingency.
And there will be no changes to the plans other than if there is unforeseen circumstances.
Certainly, the only changes to obviously we couldn't change the plans that would affect planning permission anyway. There will be no changes to the plans other than if we can change the plans to actually save money within the build. We would certainly not be adding extra elements to the build to increase cost.
Great. Okay. Were there any other ones that other people had? I thought you did have one, Andrew.
I think it was the generality that sorry, Chair. The generality that we're very pleased with the fact that the process allows us to not increase our charges for the period. There are other indicators of good management. I mean, we're particularly pleased to see that the capital reserves are run down to a mere £35,000. If all that holds good, that's another good indicator. We're diverging cumulatively against others. Others are in a worse state than us. They'll be applying to the government to increase their charges perhaps to 5 or perhaps 10% to cover the difficulties that they are in. We are very fortunate in that we've had a fantastically managed situation, I think, and we have a good news story to tell in that compared to some of our surrounding local authorities. Thank you.
Barbara.
Thank you. Andy knows that I'm always after money. Sorry, especially for the raw areas. Last year, 2025, we did a rural business funding scheme. The government gave us 150k, which I doubt that they will actually do now in 2026. but we did in fact put £100,000 of our own money toward it, which went to help quite a few rural businesses. Do you think we might be able to repeat something similar this year?
That's the intention of the £2 million or nearly £2 million priorities pot. It will be for executive committee to consider a report at the March executive around how it wants to spend that 2 million, but I would expect both community and economic development schemes across the district to feature heavily in that. But obviously that presupposes the budget will find approval in February 1st.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Andrew again.
Thanks, Chair. If I can follow up on that, it's my understanding that central government may have got wise to the fact that some local authorities have reserves, and I think we've been told, or we've heard a rumour, that by the autumn of this year, movement of reserves will be restricted to about £100,000 a go, so nothing larger than that will be allowed as a transfer individually. Thank you.
Yes, believe me, I've spent most of the day talking about a budget for a slightly larger council in the area that basically doesn't add up under any circumstances. So yes, I mean, this council is much better off than most. Okay, is there anything else that anybody would like to ask Andy while he's here? Is there anything else that we need to put on our agenda in relation to Andy's activities? I mean, not you personally. I mean, economics. I'll rephrase that. Yes. Anything in relation to finance in future or not? Is everybody happy with that? Because there weren't that many of us at the pre-meet, just in case anybody hadn't got anything else. No? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Can I just say, like, that Andy and his team, they obviously do an excellent job in keeping our finances online, and thank you very much for doing that.
Well, that's a seal of approval, even after I screwed everything up. But well done. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We will now go on to the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner discussion. And I'd like to welcome Deputy PCC Mark Bayliss and Ms. Wall. We have a number of questions, but are you going to make a speech first? Or
Chairman, thank you very much for the invitation, and nice to see some faces that I know in the room. Lou Wall, who's with me today, is our interim head of commissioning and policy. She's also a chief inspector within the force, so I will defer to Lou on any issues of operational policing, but I'm very happy to have a go at answering. I've got some questions. I assume these are the ones that you'd like me to address. If perhaps if you want me to go through them, and we can stop and pause on those if that's of use to the committee.
yes, that was the intention, and there are a few others, I'm afraid, but we will surprise you with them afterwards. They're not that bad.
Okay. After 24 years in local government myself, I don't think I've had a question that I haven't anticipated in some way or form. So we'll have a go. Maybe I will be surprised a bit later. But the first one on your list, I think, was about cancellation or abolition of the PCC and impact on the police service. What I can say is that PCCs up and down the country knew exactly 1 hour in advance of the decision being announced in the House that was going to happen. The government did not tell any PCCs, including Labour PCCs, of which there are a majority in the country. None of them knew or were informed. This is not a manifesto commitment. This is not something that Labour had indicated before. It was not something that the former Home Secretary had indicated, Yvette Cooper, when she was Home Secretary. It was very much a surprise to the system. I think that the government had decided that PCCs were to be abolished. it's a worrying time, if you want my honest opinion, for it, not for personal reasons, but for the system in terms of governance. The government had said that where mayors, strategic mayors existed, PCC powers would be rolled into the mayoralty, which seemed a sensible suggestion to me, where you were creating new strategic mayors. They're not getting a lot of extra powers, to be perfectly honest, where the government's created them. And so giving them PCC powers would at least give them a statutory footing. The government has decided partially to carry on with that policy, but as I think anybody in the room who follows it closely will know, they've subsequently cancelled the elections for mayors in 4 areas of the country that were going to have them this May. And they've cancelled the ones that were planned for 2027 as well. They were going to announce in places like Surrey that they were going to move forward, and they've cancelled those as well. So how the patchwork of strategic mayoralities will exist is unclear. What the government has said is that PCCs will be replaced by a panel of upper tier council leaders at this time, with an appointed individual to oversee the force on a day-to-day basis. Whether that is what happens, I think it's a very last minute, and the words we have from the Home Office is the officials were only told to work on this about a month before the announcement. So I think all of these plans are at a very early stage in their gestation. PCCs, I speak, as I say, as a councillor for 23 years. They are a relatively new invention of replacing the old police authorities. But what I can tell you, as a former gamekeeper turned poacher, is that actually the policing is a really complex world, and actually to understand the complexities of it, West Mercia, for instance, which isn't a particularly big force, middle-sized force. About 4,500 officers and staff, 90 odd locations, a budget of £330 million. It is a complex beast to manage, and the idea that 3 or 4 council leaders on a wet Wednesday 3 times a year are going to govern that, to me, sounds like a retrograde step. So what really is the problem, though, I suppose, is the voice of local people in the process. They won't democratically control the force as they do now. They elect somebody. That will be lost, and that is, in my view, a retrograde step. And as I say, I speak as somebody who knows what would have happened in the 2028 elections. It could have been any political party might have won it. So I do think, in terms of democracy, it's a retrograde step, particularly if we don't move forward with a strategic mayor that would get these powers. What will happen is almost certainly there will be an interregnum where the police will have very little governance, and that is a worry. And the voice of the public, which is the most important part of the PCC's role, will be slightly diluted. So I'll pause there and happily answer any more questions on that if that's of help, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. That was the one that Councillor Rain put on the list. Is that suitable an answer, or would you like to supplement your question?
I don't think I want to supplement it, Chair. Perhaps just invite Mark to deep a little further along the lines that I was, testing the waters really with the question. What are the reasons why the Home Office? What's the case that's been made that's led us to this change in really only a few years since the model was put before us? I'm puzzled to understand, why this significant change of approach. Thank you.
We're very puzzled, John, too, about this. I mean, the truth is that there's very little savings. One argument that was put forward was that this would save £100 million from an election. Well, it saves nothing if you replace the PCC election with a mayoral election over the same areas and the same mandate. So no savings there. There was an argument about democratic engagement. again, I would say to you that if the replacement model is a mayoralty, there were mayors elected on the same day as PCCs in 2024, and you, as an academic in this area, will know that mayors got exactly the same level of engagement in terms of turnout as PCC elections did. Relatively low, lower than councillors, but but not much lower. But it was that. So the final thought is that the Home Office needed to show some theoretical savings to Treasury in order to say we are really cutting back here, and that this was an offer. Now, as I say, PCCs were invented by a Tory Home Secretary, Theresa May, but they had been mooted, as you all know, by Jackie Smith of this here parish when she was Home Secretary several years before that, and they nearly came into existence then in about 2007. So they've been an idea in gestation. To me, as I say, it's a retrograde step because you won't have, certainly for years in Worcestershire, we're unlikely to have anybody who has that direct say over the police, and it's not clear to me what benefit it has. It's a sad. But what we are, I mean, remember, this isn't even halfway through the John Campion's term. His term starting his last term starting in 2024, and he carries on until 2028. So John's mission is very much to carry on and make sure that we make as much good and change as we can in the area, right up, and hopefully this government, or if it was replaced by a different government, would have another think and just make sure that governance of policing is effective and appropriate.
Okay, Barbara.
Is it about PCSOs, Barbara? PCSOs, is that the one?
No, those are all
Sorry.
mine. I'll come to them later.
Beg your pardon. No, what I want to know is who is responsible for the duty of care of all road users? Now, I'm going to be a little bit like the parochial now because this is my ward, so do forgive me, but I'm sure that the experience is similar elsewhere. I'm referring to the A44 road running through both Cotheridge and Broadwest villages. This is a main busy highway running from Oxford to Wales. So technically it's a trunk road. There's a gypsy site where approximately 15 to 20 horses are kept alongside the A44 at Cotheridge. They escape on a regular basis, possibly because their fields are in the floodplain and they're looking for higher ground. One horse has been known to have been killed. Sunday the 30th of November, someone wrote on Facebook, not sure who these horses belong to, but you might want to secure them better. Came across 15 of them on the A44 last night at 2 a.m. A few moments after we got them off the road, a police car went blue light flashing down the road, which could have been horrific if they'd been there before us. Surely this is of great concern. I, as local ward member, have had numerous concerns with horses on this stretch of road. It appears that 101 and local community officers are not taking it serious enough. One local farmer texted a community officer who didn't answer the phone, but texted back to say she wasn't working and should ring 101, which he did, and got, "What do you expect us to do about it?" response. So my question to you, Mark, is who is responsible for the duty of care of all road users, and why was the above concerns not taken seriously by the community officer and 101?
Thanks, Barbara. I mean, firstly, it's a perfect question for me, Barbara, as you may or may not know. I used to be the cabinet member for highways in the county council until May, and I'm a director of a riding school. So the livelihood of and safety of horses is something I'm personally interested in and committed to. The truth about safety on the road is it's a joint responsibility between the Highways Authority, the County Council, and around enforcement it is a policing matter. And so they're responsible for the design, safety standards on the road. For police forces responsible for enforcement of the rules of the road. Now the third E, there's engineering, and the final E in the system is education, and that is a joint responsibility. So police and the Highways Authority take a role in educating the public and all road users in terms of that. So it's not a neat answer. On your specific, the owner of the livestock has responsibility for them as well, and I know that can sometimes be difficult with gypsies and with travellers, communities. You know, they're looking for grazing. They've got long ropes, often tethering horses from one part to another. So it can be a challenge. But they have responsibility for their animals and making sure that they're secure. The Highways Authority needs to investigate any issues to do with, sight lines, visibility, standards of the road, and the force will make sure that the enforcement of the rules of the road are carried out. The second point you made about the response you've got I'm sorry for the response you've got, because it is a serious issue. Animals, and particularly an animal the size of a horse hit on the road, is a danger to itself, clearly, but also to other road users. It could kill the person in the vehicle, could kill other road users around there, and so that is something that I would expect the force to take more seriously. I'm happy that Lou will be taking a note of this. If you can provide me with any more details afterwards, we'll ask the force to investigate why you got all calls are recorded. So the 101 call will be on record, so we can listen back and give a more detailed answer on that one. It's clearly not the answer you need.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yes, you have answered the question that who is responsible for the ladder duty of care, and thank you very much for doing so. But it was rather like the disappointed in that this local farmer that phoned had the response that he did have. I will gladly give you his name and address. I think you probably know him anyway from Cotheridge. And he will quite happily speak to you. But these horses, I mean, we are looking at 15 or 20 horses. They do belong to gypsies, and they're not tethered on the side of the road. They are on land that they own, but they get out regular. And I know that it is a great concern, because you know what the A44 is like through Broadwas in Cotheridge anyway. So I'd happily give you the farmer's name, and then you can get in touch.
We'll look into it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just add that over the entire Christmas period, we had, I think, 10 horses tethered, including some in the middle of the A38 roundabout. Yeah. And I was pretty disappointed that there wasn't a joint organised kind of response to that, because of the distraction of that, and also the signs that were put up on the lights. Distracting motorists. Going around a roundabout is not on a straight road, and they were running a business from there. And that just seemed to be something that really should have been against public safety. It's nothing to do with who was doing it. It was just anybody doing that it was dangerous. And so I was kind of a bit concerned about that aspect of it. And I phoned the council, and just for everybody's benefit, the county council about it, and I said that I was told, they get 21 days to live there. But as far as I can see, a lot of people weren't actually living there. They were running a business, leaving the horses there overnight to make it look like they were living there, and they weren't actually on site. And nobody looked into that at all, including the fact that canisters with poisonous logos on were left on the side of the pavement. They were either empty or full of stuff, God knows what, and nobody even picked up on that, which could have been extremely dangerous one way or the other if they'd blown into the road or whatever. And this is not just one or two incidents. This is happening all over the place. Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hello, Mark. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Martin.
I bet you're missing the county council, not are you?
Not a huge amount.
No,
at the
I
moment,
didn't
Martin.
think you would at the moment. There you are. You're not missing much. Yes, I'll echo this because obviously I'm the county councillor for that area. So the A38, A4104 roundabout at Holly Green. The immediate neighbours did phone contact the police more than once, and I haven't really had a response at all. In fact, I met them today to talk about this issue, and they were really disappointed and angry that the police just seemed totally disinterested and wouldn't come out. They've also complained more than once about the car drifting round the roundabout, and again they phoned the police and told the police, and nobody comes. So you were talking all about accountability and how important it was to have a police and crime commissioner, but you know, to some extent, it doesn't make a difference if there is one or isn't. If nobody comes, and it seems that we have problems, and I'm sure other councillors have problems, from parking outside schools where, again, you might get a token presence once in a blue note, but you don't get really any concrete hammering, no issuing of tickets. You might get a PCSO if you're lucky, sort of stand there and chat to a few people, giving words of advice. Well, anybody who lives near a school, and I do live near a school in Kemsey, knows full well that the words of advice just fall on deaf ears, and that unfortunately enforcement and giving people tickets and them having to park with some of their hard-earned cash work. So, you know, we need the police. I know they're busy with lots of other things that are far more important, counter-terrorism, you know, all the other things that are going on. But we need, I think, really in the whole of the Malvern Hills area, is more of a almost aggressive police presence, where they actually go out and actually, rather, there's a point where you have to stop the words of advice and you have to enforcing things.
I think, Martin, thank you very much for that. And there's a whole range of issues there that I would like to, or some of them I can pick up. So I met two ladies who live at that junction there at a recent engagement event at Croom. So I probably spoke to exactly the same people that you did about the drifting, and that drifting issue is a police matter because that clearly is there is a safety issue on the road. They're breaching the rules of the road there. That was fed into our roads policing unit, and I can't tell you too many details, but there are operations in being planned and dealing with that sort of issue, because that is clearly presents a proper hazard on the roads to other users and to themselves. So what I can assure you of is that issue has not been forgotten, and there is that engagement, and that engagement from the councillor, in my case, from me as a deputy commissioner, has led to actions that are being planned. So I hope your residents will notice that soon. The horse issue is a really difficult one, because that one around, they are not on the road, they're not. They weren't causing, to the best of my knowledge, and you know I live in Callow End myself, so I went past those horses several times over the Christmas break, and I saw them and the sales activities that were going on there as well. They're not strictly breaking the law. There are other enforcement agencies, reg services, activities. It's a sort of combined effort that's needed. But of course, as a local authority yourselves, you'll know, traveller groups are very well aware of their rights and the law. And so, there is a strict number of days in which, after a notice is served, which they get and to move on. So these are not, I don't think for a minute you think they are, but these are not easy, quick matters that can be dealt with. But they are things where working together and where good interrelationships between local authorities, police and others, reg services, are the way forward, I think, to tackle some of those. There was schools. The only thing I would give you in terms of, and you acknowledged it, was just the scale of the challenge here. So West Mercia is 3,000 square miles of territory. It is 3 counties, obviously three large counties, and a population of 1.2 million ish people. We have just over 2,500 operation officers delivering, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. There's never more than about 450 officers on duty at any one time. So to do the sort of presence policing that you'd be talking about, we would have to have a force of about 4 or 5 times the current number in order to deliver that. So what does the PCC, given that scale, and it is enormous, it takes well over 2 hours to travel from Ross-on-Wye to Oswestry in the north, or from Hay-on-Wye in the west to Redditch in the east. This is an enormous geography. What do we do? And we are trying to put additional resources into those neighbourhood teams. So we've got this year, I think we've had 50 extra officers, which 29 of which are genuinely new, extra to what we had before, 21 which are redeployments, and we're pushing those out into our local team, so what you would know as a safer neighbourhood team. So in South Worcestershire, I forget the exact number, but there's a number of extra PCs who are out there now on the ground delivering the service than all the other things that they were doing before in terms of detective work, criminal justice work, all of those. So there is an attempt to focus more resources on the ground, but it always has been a thin blue line. I know it's a cliche, but when you think about it, 450-ish officers policing a geography of that scale and size, you're not going to see them every 2 minutes. But the key thing I would say is where you've got a problem, that's where I'd hope we're improving, in the sense of those linkages with communities, where if you've got an issue, every safer neighbourhood team officer, every PC in those teams, their contact details are available. You as a local member, a very active local member, if I may say, you should know yours. You should be able to pick up the phone to them, tell them about the issue, and they should be able to respond. Maybe not that day, but certainly within a few days to tackle those.
I mean, they do. I have been in contact with my local officer, and she does come back. I have met her. I have met the team at various locations, Crim Court being one of them, to try and sort of support them and work together. But my point is that they go out again on the same problem that keeps reoccurring. And it's almost as though they don't understand that just giving the words of advice has reached the point that it doesn't work, because it's, yeah, all right, I won't do it again, thanks very much, and move on. There needs to be the next step, and I suspect if you went to the next step, that the message would get round, and you perhaps wouldn't have to visit that site again for over a year, because people would be far more conscious. So, in fact, then you would free up people to do more. So I'd ask you to perhaps consider that.
Yeah. That's a very fair point. Happy to. All of the deployment issues, as you'd quite expect, you wouldn't want a politician of any sort deploying individual officers. That's the responsibility of the chief constable. And we have to, John and myself have to observe their operational independence. But what we do is set the budget and help direct the chief constable's focus into issues. But I'm very happy to take that. I'll give you an example of where the force is doing that, is speeding. Nearly all of our communities, speeding will be one of your top priorities. Now, the force is focusing additional resources this year, significant additional resources this year, on speeding, on enforcement, to make sure that issue, which is such an important one for our communities, people actually feel a difference. Now, I suppose we'll get to a point where people think, well, there's cops on every corner with handheld devices, with devices, or there's fixed cameras places, and we have to be careful to get that balance right. But there is an additional focus coming around speeding this year. So communities should feel that, and the same could be said, and I'm happily pass that back to the chief constable, your feedback, which is, words of advice can do some good, but where they've failed, we need to look at other options.
Before we go on to Christine, I just wanted to say, I think there is a big difference between horses on the side of the road and in the middle of a roundabout, because that is the road, effectively, because you're going towards it, and it's an obstruction and it's distraction when you're trying to go around busy roundabouts on the A38. there's no way that that should have been allowed to stay there. And what you said about having this joint, everybody getting together, why don't you kind of organize that so that there are, everybody goes through all of those points and has something which, you can then immediately go out rather than have to deal with each individual situation, because there are some things which would, obviously be dealt with on a regular basis, where you can actually say to the people that do this, these are the things where you're stepping over the line, because otherwise they will keep doing that even more. Can I also say about the speeding? The Three Counties has a show where modified cars come, and I stood on the entrance watching that come through, and I think virtually every single vehicle that I saw, I thought, how on earth did that get insured, let alone is it actually road legal? So we're actually even having shows here, and it's modifications and changes to vehicles as much as speeding, which are making people at risk, because those vehicles being driven on country roads, they're more likely to crash, aren't they? And one of the things that I wanted to bring up very quickly was that when these cars do crash and they end up in laybys and whatever, just on the road between here and Pershore, there are 4 sites where there's still bits of the cars left after they've been taken away. There's one still under a bridge, by the way, but that's early days. It's only been 2 weeks. Can we just also make sure that these insurance companies that are towing away people just really clear up after themselves, because it's just getting ridiculous?
I think you make a number of points there, Chairman, about the interplay between the Highways Authority, Highways Agent Authority, and the police, and who does what in the system. And I think getting that right. The point I'd make back is just the sense that in West Mercia there are 4 highways authorities. Each of the upper tier authorities is a different one. We try to work as close and collaboratively with each one of those, but people do things in different ways. Some have subcontracted the whole of their highway service to a different provider. There's a different pattern in each, but the point you make, which is a very fair one, about understanding who does what and trying to make it work as seamlessly as possible. The earlier point you made about modifications, I was lucky enough to go out on in this job. I get to go out with the cops quite often and see, sit along, ride along, and see them what they're doing. I went with the roads policing unit recently, and where we were pulling over vehicles for infringements, not just about tyres and things you might imagine, but tints on vehicles, excessive tints on windows, which makes them incredibly dangerous, lowering of suspensions, all of the usual ones. And there is a programme of these activities that goes on through the year. But I would say, if you're aware of intel of regular vehicles that are not, you don't believe are roadworthy, or you've heard through the grapevine there's a meeting of vehicles, please do feed that intelligence in, because it will help our operations to plan them.
Well, there were 3,000 of them at the Three Counties Showground,
We'll
in this area. That one show was just unbelievable. I mean, it really was. I actually phoned you on that day, the police, to let you know, because I just couldn't believe that they were actually bothering to come here and actually being put up by us, when it was just absolutely astonishing. One point, and this goes back to my question, sorry, Christine, I'll come to you straight away after that. The 101 service, I have actually reported vehicles, but I get through to somebody who answers the phone straight away, who then says, I'll put you through to the control room, and you never get through, because they're the ones who are busy. There seems to be a dysfunctional problem between actually getting the first phone call received and then getting through to the control room, whereas in the past it was all straight through to the control room. And I think that differentiation between the two is actually making it harder to pass intelligence over. That's just a point anyway. Christine.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've moved on really since I put my hand up, but I'd like to add to Barbara's, when you were kicking off about the horses, because we had the same problem at the Three Counties, and one horse just kept going on the road and just lying there. The reports that came to me was a dead horse on the road. So people who've spoken to me have often said the police can't do anything about it. So that is very concerning, especially in dark evenings. Moving on, for especially the Wells Castle Morton area, we have across the Castle Morton Common, we have livestock that's loose, and there's often there's been a nasty accident there recently. But we have trouble there getting the highways department to reduce the speeding. So it'd be nice if the police could sort of come from the other direction on that, because it's very, very disconcerting for the public driving over there that, you know, if they hit an animal, it'd be very distressing and terrible for the animal as well. And speeding in the villages, the local police have said that they would only police around the schools, which of course, as Martin says, is always chaos at twice a day. But areas around such as the three counties, which is where I'm very familiar with, as you've just said, there's all sorts of traffic that comes, but you never see any speeding being monitored there, and they use it like a racetrack. So it would be very useful. I know I'm being parochial now, as Barbara said, but you know, that type of thing. We as members know our hotspots a bit better than maybe the local police, because putting the speed gun near the school, it's already jammed and everything. Whereas we know where our racetracks are, if you like, Castle Morton Common for me, round the three counties. So that's something that it would be nice to have a dialogue where they don't just say, well, that's what we do and that's it. It would be better if we have a conversation and say, well, actually, it'd be more beneficial if it was somewhere else. So
that's certainly what
thank you for that.
That was certainly something I would like to see, Christine, as well. There was a confusion for some years. There was a confusion. I wouldn't cast aspersions about county council officers like this, but there was a confusion about who set speed limits. It's quite clear it's the county council's responsibility to set speed limits. The police are a statutory consultee on any proposed changes to that, but have no veto. And cannot require them either. They can ask for them. So the police don't set speed limits, the county does. But the example you gave, which again I know very well, is a very sensible one. I'm sure Councillor Wells is on that case as well. And it's one that, you know, I'm sure the force would want to be supportive of, because, you know, frankly, it's often sheep on that when you drive through Castle Morton Common, but it can be cattle as well, and hitting a cow at that speed would not only kill the cow, but it could kill the traffic users as well. And so it seems a very sensible solution. Some good news on speed enforcement though, because technology is our friend and is coming to our help. So an old-fashioned way of dealing with speed was either that you had a static location where a van would be parked on a verge, and it would be, you know, it would be in the same, it'd have to be in the, there weren't that many of them, and it'd be in the same spot, and everybody would know that between this spot and that spot you've got to be careful. Or it would be done by 3 police officers, and again, they have, for health and safety, they had to only be on certain places, locations that have been checked out. So you'd have police officer 1 here, who'd have the gun, be taking the speed limits. You'd have 2 cops in a car down the road, pulling them in and giving the notice of intended prosecution. So you need 3 police officers and a vehicle in order to do that. We don't need that anymore. There's a piece of technology, there's several out there, but we use one called TrueCam, which is essentially a radar gun which you can now, which has been calibrated and is checked, and can be mounted on the side of a road on a stand. You can it can be operated by a single police officer, and it can take all the details. It takes a picture of your car and the speed you were doing. It's calibrated so it stands up in court, and each of our local neighbourhood teams, so in South Worcestershire, they have access to these days. So the challenge you're facing shouldn't be one that lasts. We're rolling this technology out more because it's been such a success that we are buying more of these guns, essentially speed guns, and hopefully it will mean that we can enforce in a lot more locations than currently is possible. and it takes all the safety issues, or you only have to retrieve the gun and all the rest of it. A police officer generally is generally nearby, but all of the mechanics are dealt with. Very good piece of kit, not phenomenally expensive, and a way forward. Sorry, I've upset Councillor Allen now, Chairman, but
Sorry, Christine. Yeah.
Can I just come back on the news today? Oh, thank you for what you said about eye tests for those over 70, and then changes in the drink driving. How are you prepared for policing that and stopping people if they're against the rules? So I think it's every 3 years for over 70s, and I've not heard the figures of whether or not it's going to be a ban on drink driving or just a lowering of how much alcohol you can take. But have you been advised of this, and how will you police it?
I've only caught hold of it today, and I dare say again, it's a matter really for operational policing. But the way that policing tends to work is, while there are 43 forces, how forces tend to handle these issues is governed by the College of Policing, who sets, it's called APP, Approved Professional Practice, which basically sets out how policing goes around delivering something like that. So I would expect the College of Policing to, if that comes into law, to come up with approved professional practice around how they're going to monitor those issues. And again, it's one of those interplays between different agencies. So the driving standards, DSLA, I think they are responsible for licensing, and we would be having a relationship with them in terms of known people who are, had a license maybe, but have not had updated on their eye tests and whatever. At the moment, this is all conjecture, but it would be, it sounds a sensible thing that, there is already a minimum standard for sight, of course, and the police officers will already at the roadside assess whether somebody can meet that. I don't know. Do you want to say anything on that, Lou? Have you ever checked somebody's sight in with vehicles?
It's a long time since I was in road policing.
Okay. But
Right.
I've been out with them, and they've asked people to read number plates so many metres away as a proxy for it.
Just, Christine, it was the same people that were on the A38, by the way, at the 3 counties. And the name of the show that we were talking about was Convicted, which says it all, really. I just thought I'd pass that on. Dean's next.
This is not only parochial but historical. In that I seem to remember when we first had the first police commissioner here, I asked made much the same point, and I'm not expecting a satisfactory answer, but Hallow is 3/4 an hour away from Tenbury, where policing is centred. If we get any PCSOs out, they've spent 3/4 an hour of their time driving to Hallow, and they spend 3/4 of their time driving back. Seems rather a waste of resource to centre the air policing so far away.
I think I've got some good news for you. I like to give good news out, and we're having a reorganisation of internal structures in the force. And Tenbury, as you know, is right for us. It's right in that nexus of Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Shropshire, and it could be in any one of those. I'm pretty sure Tenbury is going to be brigaded with the Herefordians in future, and that there's a board, the part of what is currently will be serviced out of Worcester, essentially, Dean. So I think there's some good news, some common sense there. It's one of those challenges, because it could, as you know, and we've got the councillor for Tenbury here tonight. You're as close to Ludlow as you are to other places.
I'm shocked by what you say as everybody else.
Yes. So, but in terms of organisation, we are trying to make sure that the teams that respond in areas are the nearest possible ones. So we've up until the 20th of January, when it changes, we've had 5 local policing areas. North Worcestershire, South Worcestershire, Herefordshire, Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin as well. We're changing the way it's brigaded, so Shropshire and Telford will now be served by one group of officers, and Herefordshire and Worcestershire are brigaded under another chief superintendent. And we're trying to make sure that local teams, still be the local teams, are effective. We've made some geographic changes. So again, Droitwich used to be serviced because they were in the south of the county. They were dealt with out of Worcester, when actually they're nearer to Bromsgrove base in that sense, and Kidderminster. So we've made some operational changes that hopefully makes response a bit quicker.
Martin's next.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there we are. That's better. Press all the buttons. Something will happen. It's not Christmas, is it? Mark, I'm very interested to hear about these speed guns. So I'd be very grateful if you could arrange for somebody to send me some information, and also send it to Bolton Parish Council, because ever since I've become a county councillor, they've asked for active speed, control and obviously enforcement there. And they're always told it's too dangerous for an officer to stand anywhere. So this gun sounds like the problem. So could we arrange, or ask the Chief Constable to arrange to have one of these guns deployed occasionally in Bolton? And could you send information to myself and also that parish council, please?
How about coming out and coming with me and watching how they work, Martin, in your patch, and seeing?
I would love to do that.
We'll try and arrange that.
Yeah. Can I bring a parish councillor with me?
I was going to say if you must, but no, absolutely, yeah. I was a parish councillor for 10 years myself as well, but yes, if you wish, that's fine, yeah. But it would be nice to. I think the technology is really interesting and really and changes the way we can police speeding. But they're mobile, so they can be deployed in one area one day and moved.
Absolutely, and I think Bolton would be fantastic. So very happy to come out and see it.
We'll try and arrange it. So we'll go on a day trip somewhere.
I'll buy the coffee.
Okay.
Barbara.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I find it rather interesting, actually, what you say about policing. And you mentioned Shropshire and the Wrekin being that bit there. I want to know about cross-border intelligence. If you go down to Tenbury, right, and you go over the bridge, halfway across the bridge, you're in Worcestershire here, and you're in Shropshire there, right? A lot of the people living in Burford is in South Shropshire, and they actually, I think they align themselves up to Tenbury, which is in Worcestershire. So how do you cope with that sort of cross-border intelligence?
So our intel function, so the police's intelligence about people and about activities, is across West Mercia one. So that's run on it doesn't matter where you are in the patch, that's run from a team at Force HQ. So we collect intel, but there's local intel obviously that's collected in the local policing areas as well, but it's fed in. So we try and make sure that the sort of soft intelligence which your police officer on the street gets told every day about, did you know there's a car down there that doesn't look like it's moved in 6 months, or there's a problem in that house over there. That soft intel is sometimes more difficult to share, but we're trying to make sure that it's one of the reasons we're moving from 5 local policing areas to 2, is so that we can deploy resources and move them around to where the issues are at that one moment. I don't know. Do you want, Lou? This might be a very real example of how is intelligence shared between teams within the force?
Well, I think I would say that we use one sort of IT system that all officers will have access to. So they will have access to all of that intelligence.
So in records, so all of the national systems are available to all police officers. So if you search for Mark Bayliss, you'll get all the intel about me wherever you are, whether you might be looking at it from. Yeah. Big file that one is. So that's available wherever. So wherever, it doesn't matter which officer puts it into the system, anybody can look up and get those records.
So if there's a problem in Burford, which is literally just
across
over
the road,
across the road, just across the river, the the police officers in Tenbury is quite happy to walk across the bridge, are they, and sort of deal with
yes
any, like they do get the information I mean, it doesn't go to South Shropshire up to Ludlow. The Tenbury police will actually get the information, and vice versa.
The way from the control centre, if it's an incident that's happening in the control centre, you can see where every one of your police officers is at any one time, geolocated. So you can those boundaries don't matter as much. You can deploy resources from where to the nearest, depending on how severe the incident is. But if it was a severe incident and something's happening in Burford and there are resources in Tenbury, they'll deploy them from Tenbury.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the points that may have been conveyed to you, and they may be a bit misleading because they relate to an email that I did back in September. So I'll jump in if I may and try and make sense of that. I welcomed your candour when you first opened the conversation for us, much by your facial expression as anything else. I noted in the press in the last couple of days that a senior police officer averred that more police numbers doesn't necessarily mean less crime. I wondered if you had an opinion on that.
I think it's true. I think the interesting thing is that both the last government and this government has a view about police numbers, police officer numbers being the only important metric in policing, and I would say that's a mistake. So in West Mercia's workforce, we have about 2,500 police officers, very, very ably supported by about 1,500 police staff, some of which were PCSOs and are PCSOs, but the majority are civilian staff who work behind the scenes, doing all sorts of roles, and policing only operates because of their specialisms and their activities that they support. So they're the sort of support services. But governments of all hues don't ever talk about police staff and their important role in the system. And the focus only on police officer numbers means that we have had to de-civilianise our force. So as numbers of police officers have risen, so if I give you, if I just give you some ballpark figures, a police officer, just a constable, at the top of his or her rank, with on costs of their pension and their national insurance, costs about £70,000 a year to employ. Okay, a civilian member of staff, equally qualified and valuable, shall we say, costs about £50,000. So as successive governments have focused on driving up police numbers, and haven't necessarily, and this government is doing even worse than the last one in this. Whilst they're focusing on growing police numbers, what it means is that we are having to take roles that were done by civilians and put police officers into them. So you're taking out somebody who cost an average of £50,000 to the taxpayer and putting in somebody who costs £70,000 to the taxpayer. It doesn't make economic sense. And it's because, as a country, and I'm sure John would be equally candid, because we have a fixation with the number of police officers, not the number of people who work in policing. And if you need, there's all our forensic, our crime scene investigators, for instance, hugely qualified and trained. All the people who do digital forensics, I'm afraid there's a terrible epidemic of online crime these days, and they spend their civilian staff who spend their time searching for that and identifying the evidence for court on that. All the people who work in our control centres, who take calls and dispatch officers, they're really vital roles. As we have, as a country, fixated on police numbers, police officer numbers, we've had to cannibalise that. So de-civilianise it. If you were, if we didn't have this fixation, we would probably have slightly fewer officers and slightly more police staff, because that would be a more optimal mix. but it's as I say, because of the politics of it, it has forced all forces, not just us, into this. And this government, as I say, is doing exactly the same. They're talking about their neighbourhood policing guarantee, which is just about police officers and PCSOs. And the only way you can do that, for instance, the government has given us 5 million extra in our core grant from them this year, but our budget for police officers has gone up by 19 million. So we're 14 million pounds adrift, and the only way you can do that is to reduce the number of staff you have, civilian staff you have in that. So it's a suboptimal mix, shall I say, in terms of delivering the service.
Okay.
As an addition to that, if I may, service provision over the years by the police force has altered considerably. You've had more tasks put upon you.
Yep.
In a report by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation and Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, they put forward a figure that about 80% of police time is spent dealing with non-crime related incidents. That, to be clear, is not non-crime hate incidents, although they fall into that category. Any view on that you care to express?
I didn't know it was as high as 80%, but there is a lot of time spent on things that are not strictly policing matters. The police are the Swiss Army knife and the final port of call for many, in many situations, and and therefore they get pulled into things that are they are not best trained to deliver, but there's nobody else in the system to do. And so there's a lot of time that is wasted on disputes between grown adults where they want a referee and calling the police, and both sides call the police and the police turn up and then have to try to calm the situation down, and because there's no crime being committed, there's no policing purpose, but there's a dispute between neighbour A and neighbour B over how high the Leyland tree is, or whatever, whatever. That is not a good use, I would say, of policing time. We have sought to try and do some of this. The other one that happened and got particularly bad during and after COVID was about mental health incidents. Somebody having an acute mental health episode. People want somebody to help. Obviously, they a neighbour or a friend. They see their relative that is having a psychotic episode, or a very agitated state. They were ringing the police, and police were deploying. All the evidence points to the fact that a uniformed police officer turning up at somebody's house in those incidents was not what that individual needed. They needed help. Now, police officers are, as I say, I've got huge respect for them. They are like a Swiss Army knife. They've got many, many skills, but dealing with acute mental health episodes is not generally one of them. And actually, a uniformed officer turning up with a baton and parva spray can make the situation worse rather than calm it down. And so there has been an agreement reached in the last couple of years with the Department of Health that the ambulance service are the correct and appropriate agency to deal with those incidents, unless there's an immediate threat to life. So if you've got somebody who's got a knife to their throat, or is threatening to hang themselves, where a police officer has a duty to try and intervene and help, but in more general mental health incidents, those are not ones that a police officer is the correct responder from the state. The ambulance service is, but we all know what pressure the ambulance service has been faced with, and so there is no perfect solutions, but there is a better working relationship now, I would say, a better understanding between the Home Office and police and the Department of Health and Ambulance Services in that instance of who does what. But I think also we do need to, all of us, constantly educate our fellow citizens about what are the things that the police can help you with and should be the response, rather than, and what are the things that are not. They're not matters for the police. They're either a matter for another statutory agency, or they're a matter for society to try and sort out themselves.
Right, thank you. I was just going to make a point. It would be useful as well, I think, going back to the neighbourhood policing team situation, for us to have a list of actually current telephone numbers as well, because sometimes you phone 3 or 4 and none of them are on duty. I know you said that sometimes they'll get back to you, but if it is something more immediate, you know, if there was some system where, because we're all intelligence gatherers for you, and it's in our interest, and people come to us to pass that information on, and sometimes the system is very disjointed. So if there was some way that that could be improved, I mean, not suggesting there's an instant solution for that, but that would also be useful.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. I think the police service force, whatever you want to call it, has been looked upon to take up the slack from a number of areas over a number of years,
Yep.
which has caused problems. If I may ask you to speculate in the current situation. Just over a year ago, the government put out the white paper on local government reorganisation. Since then, they've decided, bless them, to scrap the police crime commissioner. More recently still, the Home Secretary, I think, is looking at regionalising the 43 police forces. Do you have any personal view, I doubt you can put forward any other, on where this may lead for the police service in terms of areas that you cope with?
I think I've probably dealt with the PCC one, where I've said I think it's a retrograde step to not have a directly elected person dealing with policing. That you can appoint. You know, Tony Benn used to talk about democracy being, you can give them a job and you can sack them, and that was a fundamental tenet. And I didn't agree with lots of what Ben said, but that I definitely did. So I think having an elected person who is responsible for holding the chief constable to account is a really important thing. As for the reorganisation of forces, I've seen in my professional career governments of all hues again spend a huge amount of time and effort reorganising the forces, reorganising structures, and it takes the eye off delivery for years whilst everybody jockeys for structures, status, areas, and it takes years to settle down, at which point the next government, who is invariably of a different colour, does it again, and it stops. I mean, I think there's quite famous Roman general's phrase, a statement that talks about, this is how long ago it is that this constant reorganisation has gone. I think any structure can work, and I think West Mercia is a big enough area as it is, 3,000 square miles, 1.2 million people, to have a force of its own. Some of the very smallest forces, like Warwickshire, which is a single county force, which is just got, I think it's just got about 600 officers, and it's very difficult to maybe be at operational scale when you've got just that limited resource budget and a number of forces. So there might be. I hope the Home Secretary doesn't choose to go for some mega force option. I would point to the largest force in the country, of course, is the Met. Nobody, I don't think even those in London, would suggest that the Met is a well-organised and efficient and effective police force. So I would hope that they don't say that is our model through which we end up with some, 6 giant forces across the country, because your ability to influence at the highest levels then will be very, very small indeed. So I would say there's probably something less than 43, and hopefully more than a dozen that if there is some reorganisation. But frankly, I'd say leave well alone. Let's make the system work. It can work. Let's not do structural stuff. I don't know what what you think. I was never a huge fan of unitarisation. I think it will probably, in local government terms, I think it will take us years to settle it down, to go through the whole wave of officers getting paid off and officers being recruited and buildings being disposed of and built and all the rest of it. There'll be a huge dysfunction in that. I'd also point out that financially, we're lucky enough in West Mercia to cover a lot of unitaries already. Shropshire is a very, very broken. You know, they're I think they had about 6 million left in their reserves for a unitary. You know, you see unitaries across the country which are in financial distress. Now, I know the county councils here. All I'm pointing out is that I suppose no structure that I've seen or observed across the country is immune to the challenge of finances that we're all facing.
So thank you for that. I think a lot of us would agree with what you're saying. I was more curious that we see various possibilities for Worcestershire, North and South, and who we might align with in terms of mayoral strategic groups. And we've watched the integrated care boards also under Price Waterhouse decide to integrate with the two counties, Worcestershire and Herefordshire, to integrate with Coventry and Warwickshire. I just wondered, from someone inside the force, as it were, whether you had any views or feelings or thoughts on the way your area structure might be pulled in because of political pressure to something aligning with the areas that we're pulled into. Thank you.
The one I would make, the comment I would make is that, again, any geography can work, but let's harmonise all the public services around those geographies. The patchwork quilt of some things that are like a West Mercia footprint, some things which are Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Coventry and Warwickshire, some services, probation, which might run Gloucestershire, Hereford and Worcester and the West Midlands. You know, I think in terms of effective public service delivery, we should have some common footprints because it will make the partners work more effectively together. And the trouble is that because so many government departments are involved, each of them appear to be making separate decisions in their own departmental interests, which just layers more dysfunctional geography on dysfunctional geography. If we are going to have this, you know, big bang approach to local government reorganisation in the country where all the counties are going and districts are going, can we have some clarity that, you know, probation services, that health services and policing will follow those geographies too? And I guess, you know, at least then we'll be talking about the same geography.
I think actually, yeah, I would agree with that as well, because it does seem strange that there is no plan for all of these things which are effectively national services being divided up in a consistent way across the country when they're all linked to each other. I mean, fire service, ambulance services, education, NHS, I mean, they're all linked. You all need to be able to know who you're dealing with and not have to cross artificial borders which you put there for no good reason whatsoever. And that was a chance to sort it out, and there doesn't seem to be any consistency on this whatsoever at the moment. Anyway, Christine.
Thank you. This is a good debate. I wanted to move on to domestic abuse and violence against women. I'm hoping that you've made inroads in the domestic abuse side. I've seen that on the Health and Wellbeing Board, which I've attended, and what we're doing and everything. But there is a rather sinister development now of crimes against women that's coming from globally, the internet. There's a disrespect for women generally. How are you coping with this? I'm trying to make it a small speech really, but it's a huge topic and it's very, very...
It is.
We're going backwards.
I wouldn't say I don't think as a country we're going backwards, because I think we're exposing the scale of the challenge, and I think that's the first point of actually doing something about it. So from a policing perspective, 1 in 5 of all our calls for service relate to domestic abuse. So, 20% of everything has a domestic abuse marker attached to it. 90% of those, of the victims are women, 10% are men. But 90% of those are women. So there's a huge overlap between domestic violence and violence against women and girls. I think we've come a long way in this country in terms of policing, in terms of tackling domestic abuse. It was a scandal that decades ago police officers used to attend and say, "Oh, it's a domestic," and walk away. They certainly don't do that anymore. In fact, I would say they more proactively deal. All domestic abuse incidents are a grade 1 incident, so cops are dispatched to the address immediately and as fast as they can. There is, in most cases, in most crimes, there is a presumption against arrest. So police officers will only arrest if there's no good a good reason why you wouldn't do it. There's a good reason why you would do it. In domestic abuse, the presumption is the other way round, and so the perpetrators are arrested and taken away, partly to give victims time to process and an ability to be separated from their abuser, so that they can report their incident without fear. And to be able to address these issues. John has always, as Commissioner, has always focused a lot of resources on this. We commission about £14 million worth of services. I might be 12 million of services for victims of crime, and the vast majority of that is for domestic abuse and sexual abuse. In West Mercia. So we help victims to prepare for court, to deal with the criminal justice system. We work extensively with Women's Aid across West Mercia, and with agencies such as Axis and Razak, who deliver services for victims in these circumstances. So there is a real focus. I think you'll know this government has committed to reducing it by half, and has issued a new strategy in the last 10 days, I think, around this. There's more to do. This is an epidemic, but I do think we are making it is something that was always there. It was just hidden. It was just not spoken about, and getting over the taboo of it and making it totally unacceptable is something we've all got to work on, because it's a majority. It accounts for the majority of violence in this country.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up and just ask about your prosecution rate?
In what are we talking about? Rape specifically, or are you?
We've got that, but we've also got this huge backlog with the courts and everything. And how is that impacting on, everything to do with it, really?
It's a cliche, but justice delayed is justice denied, and it absolutely is the case. And cases are being listed, for 2028 and later, at the moment. And victims and the accused are waiting years for court and for judgment, and that cannot be right. And so there are huge issues in the criminal justice system. COVID absolutely clearly played a part in it, but that was not the only reason why we have these issues in our system today. The Lord Chancellor, as you know, has come forward with some proposals about the removal of jury trials in certain cases. I don't know how that will make the system faster. I think many legal experts are saying, and I'm certainly not one of them, but I think many legal experts are saying they don't know how that makes the system faster. There were some proposals which were about magistrates sitting with judges, and basically having like a super magistrate, which sounded like they had the potential to increase the court days. But it is a very serious problem for us as a country. I think we need to invest. There's many different areas of the public purse which need more money, but I would say criminal justice is absolutely one of them. Because people, it makes, there is some evidence that it makes people plead not guilty because they know it's going to have years on awaiting trial, when if they knew they'd be in court quickly and they could get the crime dealt with quickly in their sentence and be back out, they'd plead guilty early on. But if you know you can have 3 years, in which case the evidence, the witnesses might give up, die, for some reason or other, their memories are much more difficult, in court to recount accurately under cross-examination, and 3 years down the line. For all of those reasons, delays in the criminal justice are unacceptable. Just on the issues of conviction rate or prosecutions and convictions, there have been a number of changes that were made in the system to make prosecutions more specialist in rape and serious sexual assault cases. So judges have to be specially trained and have a ticket to hear those cases. Barristers have to also are specialists in those cases, which helps with the presentation of evidence, the acceptability of the evidence that is presented. There are enhanced protections for witnesses and victims in those cases to be able to deliver their statements not live in court. So there's been a whole range of incremental changes to try and make the system work better and to give a more balanced and fair system. But fundamentally, that delay is too long, and it's an unacceptable delay for all involved.
Cynthia.
Yes, just a quick one. I've got a 19-year-old granddaughter who was raped by her boyfriend when she was 15 at a party. Then he started 6 months later. She didn't tell anybody. 6 months later, her ex-boyfriend started sending her quite explicit messages about, why didn't you enjoy it? Oh, you're not supposed to enjoy the first time, are you? No, and I got you, I enjoyed it. And so it was very clear that he'd done it. It was no doubt. So Jamie went to the police and everything. That's the girl, by the way. She went to the police, and the police started interviewing people. 3 years down the road, they've decided to drop it because there's too long a queue for the courts. Well, that lad's got away with it now. Well, that's not right, is it?
Well, let's start by saying it's a terrible story, Cynthia, you said there.
He is now studying law at university, though. That made her do that.
I would hope that the reason that the case didn't proceed was not about the length of court backlog, because that isn't a reason that I'm aware of being given. I mean, the CPS obviously make the decisions on whether to charge based on the evidence that the police put forward to them. Often, I mean, clearly, when there's a long delay between the incident and it coming to police's attention, it makes evidential quality issues. It makes collecting the evidence and presenting a strong case of a prima facie case to answer much more difficult. But it wouldn't be acceptable in my mind if the reason was, well, it's going to be 3 years, because even if it is 3 years, your granddaughter deserves the day in court. I mean, there are other reasons why no further action and charges are not brought. A whole host of reasons the CPS, can make their determination on that. But certainly, I would hope that people are, that the police are doing as very much as they can to present a stronger case as possible to the CPS for those charging decisions. But I don't know if you've got anything else you want to say on that one, Lou, because you're some experience in that area.
I was just going to say, I mean, it depends how long ago it was. I'd need to have a look. Yeah, because there is the victim's right to review as well, where you can sort of challenge that decision. But
Perhaps we could at least we'll look into whether that's a
Yeah.
possibility and that's something. No.
I don't know whether she'd want to bring it all up now.
Yes.
That's the point.
It's one of those terrible challenges. I'm so sorry to hear.
Right. Can I just also say there was one other aspect of that? How many of the 20,000 extra prison places are we likely to get? Because there's another section of the criminal justice system which regulates everything. Because if you haven't got anywhere where people can be put, then things do get slow, don't they?
They do, and I'm not aware of any additional places being built within West Mercia. I could be wrong on that, but I'm not aware of any. I mean, places are obviously where people get sent to prison. It depends on a whole range of things, but we do obviously have Long Lartin within, which is maximum security, one of I think only 6 maximum security prisons in the UK, which we have in Worcestershire. And we have Hewell Grange, obviously, in at Redditch, Bromsgrove. But I'm not aware of additional prison places being planned in West Mercia. I could be wrong. Do we know? Do you know of any?
I don't know.
Wow. So where are the 20,000 going then is the next question. But anyway, that's not for us here now. But it is interesting because I just read that because I thought, that might be something that would make a difference. But obviously, if none of them are planned for here, that's very strange, really, when you think about it. Can I just say, both Cynthia and I are probably aware of a situation now in Malvern where there is a landowner, building owner, that might actually have links with a foreign government because we found information in the public domain, surprisingly, which residents have provided. We may need to bring something quite serious to your attention. How do we do that? Because when it involves security issues for the whole country, it's kind of like, what do you do?
It would be a matter for the police rather than the police commissioner. But I can, if you have anything like that, I can provide you with. We have a superintendent who will deal with all of those sorts of issues.
Yeah, the links that which we found because we looked into something quite serious, and this is a major property owner across the entire country having links with a very hostile foreign government, which nobody ever even dreamed would be something we'd find out. So I thought I'd just bring that up as well.
No.
Thank you.
Just for information, in addition to our own organised crime, serious and organised crime that we have here, that regionally there is a layer, a regional organised crime unit, which is a collaboration of all 4 forces in the West Midlands, which deals with that, and counter-terrorism is also dealt with on a regional basis. But there are officers in West Mercia who link between those two. So if anybody knows of anything, there are ways of getting that information into the system.
Thank you very much. It's been a great conversation, as it was called. Has anybody else got anything else they would like to bring up specifically, or can we let these very busy people go? Thank you very much on behalf of everybody.
Thank you. I think John might want to.
Sorry, John wanted to say something. He's not important, but we'll let him.
The one element that's been increasing in crime is cybercrime, and it's something I've been bringing up at the panel meetings for quite a while now. So I wonder if you could say what developments we've had, because there's 50% of crime is cybercrime, and it's actually quite a big element to be dealt with. So it impacts at various different levels as well. Could you actually give us a picture of what you're actually doing with regards to that, how that's linked into, because it's quite broad, it's international and it's regional?
So the nature of criminality and crime is changing and evolving all the time as people work out that as criminals work out the risk and return on different types of activities. So once upon a time, stealing radios out of cars was a fairly low risk and okay return on that, and there was a high proliferation of that. That doesn't happen these days because of technology changes and all the rest. Fraud, of which cyber crime is often part of that, is definitely a growing area. So the British Crime Survey shows that everything other than fraud is on a long downward trend in terms of criminal activity in this country. Over the last 30 years, crime has continued to fall under the British Crime Survey year on year, and that's the most authoritative and longitudinal piece of research. Counter to that is fraud, which has been rising, and online fraud particularly over recent years. So you've got two different trends. There is a challenge on that because often that is being conducted internationally, and is more difficult to police and to address. Locally, we have an economic crime unit that's based at HQ that is looking at these issues, and where we can identify perpetrators in the UK and based in West Mercia, we work together with other forces to bring that evidence and to arrest those and to bring those to justice. The challenge is, and it is an international challenge, of how do you stop, your Albanian, Lithuanian, it could be anywhere, pick a country of your choice, criminals who are targeting people in the UK through electronic means, often to solicit monies and resources. I think, John, that is something that battle is still being fought, and collaboration with our European partners and Interpol is still something we've got to do more on in order to collate the evidence to be able to, and we need people in those third countries to be able to take action to bring them to justice. But it's quite a passive thing, but we need to continue to educate ourselves about, and our relatives and our friends and loved ones about what we can do to avoid being victims of that. They are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and it is a challenge to do that because, as I say, the way people they are always thinking of new ruses to which they can try. But it is a challenge. But I've been lucky enough to go out on a couple of jobs with the Economic Crime Unit, who have used that evidence to piece together a case around cyber fraud and arrest individuals here, and that's very good to see. And the use of covert technologies in order to create the evidence base to bring them to justice is quite impressive, really.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Just final. You did mention that there was. I think there is an important role for this. The impact of education, and I wondered whether is there a programme within West Mercia about educating residents or people of West Mercia about how to detect whether they've been scammed or whatever's happening, whatever type of fraud is taking place through the cyber medium. Is there a process being set up to try and educate people to make that less likely to be successful?
There's a national programme called Action Fraud. I think it might have just changed its name, actually. I don't know if you've got the new name, Lou, but Action Fraud is a pan-UK scheme where who take the lead because of the international nature of it, in not being a locally based crime often. They take the lead in policing for education, but there's more for us all to do. I think it's one of those things, even as simple as, could we, as councillors, you will often be communicating with your electorate, whether it be leaflets or Facebook or all sorts of things. What messages should we give you to pass on about keeping people safe and away from fraud? So I think there's a much bigger piece we could do in this country to make ourselves safe, and using all of the channels, whether it be civil society, whether it be voluntary community organisation, or elected members, to try and keep pushing that, because each one of us must have had several incidents in recent months where we've thought, hang on a minute, is that right? Are they they're asking me for a password or an email or it does this look right? If it doesn't look right, don't engage, check. But we've got to keep doing more.
Thank you. Just one point on that. Also, perhaps a preventative system as well, where some lies are being told on the internet about something or some people or whatever. Those community websites could be linked not only to deal with cybercrime, but also to refute things where people are otherwise likely to get hurt. Yeah. That's another idea. I just thought of that while I was listening to that. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. That was much appreciated.
Nice to see you all.
Right, we're now going on to our work programme. At the pre-meet last night, we went through a couple of things that we are going to have an extra meeting about in the end of March. I think we agreed, didn't we? Yes. Which will be related to, as I said before, the modelling for the River Severn, surface water drainage, the report back from the Task and Finish group. Pardon? Oh, yes, the River team. Yes. Where is that again? No, I'm only joking. We discussed that, of course. Yes, it's the entire catchment, so it includes all of that anyway. So, yeah, we'll make sure. And the team was in the paper today about the very trees that you were talking about last night and how the delay about removing them. Powick Bridge. Right. So, the main question was there anything else that we need to include that we could put onto that particular meeting? Out of our service was the other thing that was on the list. Should we put that onto that meeting as well? Sorry.
It's more a question really for everybody. Should we be monitoring local government reorganisation?
It's a point that was raised right at the start, and I agree. Yeah.
Right, okay. So shall we have a discussion about that in that meeting as well?
Just looking at Vic, is it something that
Progress.
we can sort of scrutinise as it's going through? Or I don't want to waste officer time on it as such, but it does feel, I mean, Mark said so much that I agreed with.
It's probing people like Mark to see what's going on there and so on.
Yep, I think that's very wise, Vic.
Just, I mean, we're in a bit of a sort of period of inactivity, really, until we know what the government's decision is, which was expected in July of next year. And then there'll be all manner of activity working towards whatever proposal we're told is the solution for Worcestershire. So I think there possibly is a role for scrutiny. It might be after the decision is made in terms of which proposal, and we'll see sort of more activity, and there'll be more to sort of get your teeth into and to be aware of and to challenge at that point post June. So my suggestion is yes, it is for the long list, but not quite now. Maybe from September onwards, for instance.
Could I just caveat, because we learned something tonight which I didn't know, which was the fact that things have changed in terms of the mayoral responsibility issues. So if there is anything that comes up that we didn't know before, maybe we could just have an update, meeting by meeting on that, because that is not necessarily you having to come, but somebody could just, we could get yeah, they are. And I will try and keep everybody informed about what's happening at county, so with Martin and the other county councillors as well. Okay. So, but I think that's a really good point, because believe me, things are happening all the time, which we're not aware of. Okay. Is that it? Anybody else got any further questions? Thank you very much for coming. And I think that was very constructive, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.